Growth group this morning. We're going to do our best to finish up this lesson, possibly starting on the next one. After this, I'll have a group of studies that we'll do where we'll go back to studying and coming back and discussing like we had before. In the new year, we're going to try to do something a little bit different, all right? You look at me a bit funny. Because there are some people who like the format where you take it away and you put like 30 minutes of study into it and you come back and you discuss it, right? There's some people who like that format. Then there's some people who like the format of, well, I don't have 30 minutes to an hour. I think I don't, but I'd want to come and learn, and you just want to come and learn. And so next year what we might do, we might offer two separate things going on simultaneously. One, to be in, you have to commit at least 30 minutes a week to actually studying the lesson. And then the other one would just be a class that's taught about something. Does that make sense? And so that way it would give you an option, a variety, a difference of things. And we'll look at that as we, believe it or not, we're getting close to Vision Sunday, aren't we? And so looking forward to next year, and that's one of the things that we've actually been discussing in some different ways about doing. And then also I'm developing, and once I finish writing this, I'll have everyone, we'll all take it together, and it's about a 3 or 4 weeks of a lesson of, okay, so you're new to New Beginnings, here's a class for you. And every so often we'll run it. And it will go through like the history of our church. It'll go through like the basic doctrinal beliefs of our church. And then it will go through how you can get involved in the church. Does that make kind of like an introduction to life at New Beginnings, right? And so we'll have something like that available. And then what we also might make available next year in the teaching side of things, if you have never gone through a discipleship program where you learn this is what we believe and this is why, we'll give you that option during this 9:15 time to actually come and do that. So that way you don't have to develop a whole nother hour in the week outside of church to do it. You can actually come to church and we'll do it with you in that type of a session. Does that? So we've got a few things that we're looking at adjusting how we use this time, but ultimately there will always be some way to study the Bible together, all right? Now, just real quickly about spending, we said resist comparing what you have to others is a good principle. We talked about rejoice in what you do have, not in what you have not, all right? Because you have more than you realize than you don't have. And we talked about return the first 10% back to God. And then lastly, this week, we're going to look at this principle, and that is this: refocus. Hold what you do have with an open hand. Hold what you do have with an open hand. What if, in addition to giving generously back to God at least 10%, what if we gave him access to the other 90%? What if we said, you know what? I'm going to give God the availability not just to use the money I make and give 10% of my money back to God, but what if I say, Lord, you've given me a home to live in. I'm giving you my home back, and if you could use it for your will and your honor and your glory, use it. What if we said that with our vehicle? What if we said that with different things? Do you kind of get the idea? Refocus it. Years and years ago, my wife and I determined that our home was going to be a place where we tried our best to help people, if God gave us the opportunity. And you never know what God's going to bring your way. As a result of it, we've had some interesting people stay at our house. You say, did you know all of them? No. Some of them came to church that night. Was the first time they ever came to church. We found out they were sleeping in their car. And we were like, we got a spare bed. Do you want to stay? And they did. One of those people I just actually talked to last week. and he called me for some advice because he was getting ready to sell his business to go full-time into ministry, and he wanted to know a place to study ministry. I said, well, I know a place where you can go and you don't even have to leave where you are. And he's like, how can you do that? And I told him about the Bible college where I taught. And I said, and guess what? He said, what? I said, I'll be one of your teachers. He said, oh, that'd be good. And I said to him, brother, how you doing? Like, what's going on? He goes, oh, remember when I first came to your church? And I said, yeah, I remember. And he goes, remember I wasn't in a good place? And I said, no. He said, remember how I stayed with you for like 2 months? And I'm like, yeah, we enjoyed it. Like we had a live-in cook and a gardener, and it was wonderful. And by the way, when I say live-in cook, this guy has worked at a 3-headed Michelin star restaurant before as a head chef. This guy was the head chef, not like the head chef, but like the chef over all the food on a cruise ship. Does that make sense? So he wasn't like just a chef of a restaurant on the cruise ship. He was in charge of the food on the cruise ship, right? That was him. And you name the famous Australian chef, he has cooked with them. You know, all the judges and this and that. He knows them all. He's cooked with them all. He's had restaurants now in Australia and things of that nature. And I said to him, how you doing? And he goes, I've just decided I'm going to get serious about serving God. And I said, oh, how serious? Like, because we've had this conversation before. And I said, how serious? He goes, oh, I've put my property where I used to live in the territory up for sale, and that was valued at $1.3 million. So that's up for sale. I said, what? He said, yeah, that's what it was valued for. That's what it's on the market for. Offers over that. And I'm like, okay. He said, I put my house up for sale where I live now. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Because he told me his next plan. And I said, oh, okay. And he goes, oh, just so you know, that house is valued at $1.7 million. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah. And then I've put my business up for sale as well. And I'm like, oh, yeah, your business. He makes cakes for a living. He has a cake company, and, all the restaurants, they usually serve his cakes. And I was like, oh, really? He goes, yeah. That was just put on the market for $1 million as well. I'm like, so you're basically telling me that you have over $4 million worth of property and businesses on the market to sell right now? He said, yeah, that should be enough to get me through to be able to serve God on. And I'm like, you're kidding me. And I said, wow, how'd that happen? And he said, well, it happened because all those years ago, you didn't let me give up. You used your house as a tool to help. And I went, really? And he said, yeah. And I thought, well, that's really cool. We actually accomplished what we were trying out for. So refocus what you do with what you have. How do you hold things in your hand? Do you hold them like this, or do you hold them like that? That'll change how you give, because then everything you have can be used of God. It's not just money. And you understand, God doesn't just want your money when it comes to giving. He owns the 100%. He tells us we can keep and live off the 90%, and we should be giving him the 10%, at least as a starting point. But all of it, and all things, he should have what? Preeminence. He should have first place. And so we need to move towards that sort of mindset. What if our homes, our cars, our tools, our clothes were available to God to bless others? What if we truly were willing to share it all to help people? So let me ask you a question as we begin to close up this lesson. Hey, what is it that God is saying to you today in regards to your giving? What do we need to do to respond to him? And then think about, where do you feel the most convicted to change? The change from this to a, Lord, it's yours. Whatever it is, you can have it. Hey, God's calling each of us to live financially free and to follow him in a consumer-driven culture. But that looks different for each and every one of us. Because each and every one of us has different things available to us, right? We have different responsibilities. We have different possessions. We have different skills and different abilities that we can steward for Him. Do you need to resist comparing yourself to others? Maybe you need to just stop. You know what I found? Have you ever? Yeah, I used to always get from the library. You know how you can get subscriptions from the library for magazines and stuff? I used to love to read all the latest technology magazines. I did. I love to read everything that was coming out, but I don't read them anymore. You say, why? Because I realized, you know what they were doing to me? Comparing what I had to what I didn't have. And there's nothing wrong with the magazine. Like, it's fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. But if it was causing me to go, this is what I have, but I don't want that anymore. I want what that has. What was that doing? Now, you may look at the magazine and go, that's all dumb. I don't want any of it. And it may not even tempt you. But I guarantee we could find something that would for each one of us, right? And so, what is it like that? Maybe you need to start rejoicing and thanking God for everything you have. He has blessed you, and everything that He's blessed you with, rather than focus on what you don't have, focus on what He's given you. Maybe you have never taken the leap of faith to actually start returning 10% to God. Why not try? I mean, the Bible says, try me. God flat out says, try me. Give it a go. See if, prove me. So go for it. Maybe we need to refocus and surrender the possessions to God that are possessing us. Either way, let's not just go, hey, well, these are some good biblical principles on spending and just let it go. But let us be actively involved in allowing God to govern how we spend and using the right things to spend. All right, now, the next lesson that we're going to be looking at, and we'll start a little bit, take your Bible, if you will, and turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 9. We'll read some verses and sort of introduce what we're going to be talking about. All right, 2 Corinthians chapter 9, we'll start reading verse 6. It says, but this I pray, he which soweth sparingly shall reap also sparingly, and he which soweth bountifully shall reap also bountifully. Every man according as he purposed in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound towards you, that ye always having all sufficiency in all things may abound to every good work. As it is written, he hath dispersed abroad, he hath given to the poor, his righteousness remaineth forever. Now he that ministered seed to the sower, both minister bread for your food, and multiply your seed sown, and increase the fruits of your righteousness, being enriched in everything to all bountifulness, which causeth through us thanksgiving to God. For the administration of this service not only supplieth the want of the saints, but is abundant also by the thanksgiving unto God. Well as by the experiment of this ministration, they glorify God for your professed subjection unto the gospel of Christ, and for your liberal distribution unto them and unto all men, and by their prayer for you, which long after you for the exceeding grace of God in you. Thanks be unto God for his unspeakable gift. Now, as we're looking at this passage of Scripture, Paul's talking to the Corinthian believers about their giving and about these different things. And so We're going to be looking at that in our giving. Now, I read an illustration as I was preparing for this. In 1913, in Dayton, Ohio, they experienced the greatest natural disaster in their history up to that point. In March of that year, a series of winter rains began to hit that area, and within 3 days, a large amount of rain had fallen through all that river area. And where they were is where all that river water came together into like a big dam or something of that nature. And it would all collect there and it would all build up. Well, guess what? And anywhere, when a lot of water comes and builds up that exceeds the capacity of what holds it, what happens? It flooded. And then one of the worst floods, like millions of dollars damage, the entire town was wiped out. After it all happened, they got this idea that they got together and they said, you know what? If we're going to continue living here, we're going to rebuild this city. That can never happen again. Well, I guess that's better than what some people do. Well, we got flooded out. That's a 1 in 100-year event, so let's just rebuild and act like nothing happened. And then it happens again. So at least they had some sort of brains to them. And here's what they decided to do. They said, how can we distribute, when we have too much of a good thing, how can we distribute that water to places that need it? And they said, well, we could build channels, and we could build, kind of like outlet valves, almost make like man-made rivers that only filled with water when we had too much water. And then what we could do with those, we could put those out to the farmers. So then as we had too much water, we could fill like containers that they had for their livestock and to water their crops. And guess what they did? They did exactly that. And guess what? To this date, they have never flooded again. Because they figured out when they had too much, how could they give it away in a controlled fashion to be able to benefit everyone around them? Well, isn't that what God asks believers to do? Like, really? Isn't that what he asks us to do? Hey, when I give you an overabundance, I'm not intending for you to keep it all to yourself. I'm intending you to bless others. I'm intending you to help other people. And so just like they did that, our money is much the same way. Just a lot like the water can be used to produce life or destroy it, so can money. Hey, too much money can destroy a life as much as it can bless a life. I've seen so many people where they start getting some money and then they start making the choices all about money, and what happens? They become absolutely consumed with it. And Paul, to the Corinthian believers, he's sort of reminding them of some things. He's writing to the church at Corinth to encourage them to give generously as they had promised. Because a year before 2 Corinthians 9, the thing went out that there were some believers that were struggling. Now, believers struggling back then was a real thing because in a lot of places in the Roman Empire, when you converted to Christianity, you literally lost your job. You weren't permitted to work. And so they would take up offerings to help people like that who lost their job because of the faith, right? And so the church of Corinth had already promised a year ago to give an offering towards that. Well, now, a year later, Paul had sent, I believe, if I remember right, he had sent Titus to go collect the offering. Because after all, if a year ago you said you were going to give an offering, you probably should have had plenty of time to collect it, yeah? And when he got there, Paul had to give him a little encouragement. Hey, you promised us a year ago. Well, let's get with it. Let's do it. And we're not doing this because we want the gift. We're doing this, what the fruit may abound to your account. And so we begin to see how he does that. And Paul sends Titus and several others to collect this offering for those in need. And the very first thing he tells them is that our giving starts with gratitude. Our giving starts with gratitude. Hey, if you want to worship God instead of money and enter into this journey of overflowing generosity, the best part to start is with gratitude. That's it. Giving starts with gratitude. If you're not grateful, you're not going to be giving. If you think you deserve it, do you want to give it? No. So we'll stop there, but giving starts with gratitude is where we're going to start out. We'll continue on as we begin to look at that topic, and we'll look at a couple other things that giving does that are vital parts of a believer's life. And by the way, this giving starts with gratitude. That's not just money. Yes, I give money because I'm grateful for what God's given me, but I also give other things that God's given me, like time, talents, treasures. Why? Because I'm grateful for the time God's given me. Hey, none of us are promised tomorrow. I'm grateful for the talents God's given me, so I'm going to give them back and use them for Him. I'm grateful for the treasure God's given me, so you kind of get the idea. It's not just about the money. It's about everything being grateful for, and out of that heart of gratitude, giving back. And that's what Paul was trying to remind the Corinthian believers. Hey, listen, the reason why you should be giving is because you're grateful for others who've given to you. You're grateful for all that God's done for you. And you're grateful that if you were in the position of these believers, they would do it for you. And so giving starts with gratitude, all right? We'll